Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell, and today we bring you an encore presentation of one of our very favorite episodes. Our team is working behind the scenes right now to bring you more amazing stories when our live programming returns in February. If there is an urgent update from the health system, of course, we'll be right here and let you know first. Until then, please enjoy this encore presentation and make it a great day. Coming up today, no incision, no radiation, a cancer treatment using the power of sound. Find out who's eligible for this minimally invasive option. Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome to the Morning Medical Update. Today, we are concluding our series on prostate cancer with one of the newest treatments offered here at the University of Kansas Cancer Center. It's not for everyone, but for those who are eligible, it offers a much faster recovery with fewer side effects. It is called high-intensity focused ultrasound, or HIFU. On previous episodes, we've shown you a similar technology is used on the brain, where more than 1,000 beams of sound waves are focused on a very specific spot, heating it up in order to treat things like Parkinson's or essential tremor. But how does this technology work on the prostate, and what are the trade-offs when compared to more traditional treatment options? Dr. Will Parker back with us again, urologic oncologist and surgeon who works exclusively on prostate cancer. And we promise he is not the only prostate surgeon here at the health system, but he deserves credit really for pushing for more awareness around this disease. And I have learned a lot this month and met some great survivors that you have introduced us to, so thank you. And that includes the man that we are meeting today, Ken Betts. He was first diagnosed in 2018, and by the time that he needed more treatment in 2023, he benefited from technology that was not available just a few years prior. Ken, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm so great. Thank you. Let's start with your diagnosis. How did you find out that you had cancer?
So, as you said, it was back in 2018. I remember my family and I, me, my son, and his kids were headed to the Big 12 basketball tournament. And I got the call from Dr. Parker in the car. And he told me that the results of that scan at that time, I think he said there was like 2 little spots of cancer. I'm not for sure. But it was definitely cancer. But he immediately told me right after that that we caught it early, that we could treat it, and not to be alarmed. He was very calming for me. So yeah, that's when I first found out.
Ken, you had treatment options. Why did you choose radiation over surgery?
So I never had any surgery before, and I necessarily wasn't ready to start then. So and then Dr. Parker told me that there were options available. So I decided to, instead of going for surgery at that time, to go for radiation.
So as years went by, you were getting follow-ups, tracking your PSA level. Yeah. When did your doctor suggest getting a PET scan?
So the thing was, my numbers were always low, but they were consistently going up and never coming back down. So I think it was finally in March of 2023, Dr. Shin suggested that we do another PET scan just to see what was going on.
So Dr. Parker, remind us about, we talk about PSA, but this PSMA PET scan, how are they, what are they, how new are they, and how are they helpful in you helping diagnose your patients?
Yeah, I mean, they're incredibly powerful tools. PSMA is a protein that's expressed on the surface of prostate cancer cells. We've identified a way essentially to target that protein and allow it to light up using a radioisotope so that then we can identify where the cancer cells are. These were first approved in 2021, so that's how new we're talking about here with respect to helping diagnose men and understand the extent of the disease. Previously, we had to use less powerful tools to see if cancer had spread, which meant that sometimes we would treat men who already had cancer that had left the prostate and gone somewhere else. Treating them with just focusing on their prostate, unfortunately, kind of pushes them towards failure because we're not including all of the disease that is present. So these PET scans are actually making us more able, I guess, to cure the disease, to target the disease in a way that's going to be beneficial.
Yep, that's the goal. All right, we got show and tell. We got
Yes.
we're going to turn to the handy dandy monitor here. So tell us
Yes.
kind of what we're seeing and point it all out to us.
Yeah, so this is an MRI, and this is actually Ken's MRI. So this is his prostate in the middle. It's a little hazy on this particular screen, but essentially his prostate cancer is this slightly darker region, and this is the right side of the prostate here. And so it's just in a very, very focal part of the prostate.
All right, next, I think we have another scan. Okay, so what are we seeing here?
So this is the PET scan. So very different than the MRI, where the MRI is actually looking at anatomy. This is looking at function. So what's lighting up here in red is the prostate cancer cells that are active. So these are metabolically active cells. They're growing, they're dividing. And so using the PET scan, we can identify exactly where the cancer is within the prostate. And thankfully, they overlap. I mean, what we saw in the MRI aligned completely with what we're seeing on the PET scan.
All right, let's check this one out and show us what we're seeing here, because I think there's several images involved.
Yeah, so this is kind of a composite picture of everything. So this is allowing us to say, okay, well, we saw it in the prostate. We know it was in this one small area in the gland. But when we look at the entire body, is there anywhere else where the cancer could be? And lo and behold, there's not. There are certain things that are darker on this scan by nature of kind of what they are. So for instance, the kidneys take up a lot of this contrast. So that's what we're seeing here.
Right.
They light up. But in terms of actual cancer, the only spot is this spot in his prostate.
All right, I knew those were the kidneys. I could definitely identify the kidneys. Does this mean that Ken's original radiation treatment, that it missed a spot?
No, it didn't miss it. But one thing that's unique about radiation, because the prostate's staying in place and the radiation is being focused at the cancer cells, the cells have to respond to the radiation. So I can guarantee that those cancer cells got radiation. It's just they didn't respond to the radiation therapy. And so they persisted, and there they are.
So Ken could have received more radiation or surgery. What made him a good candidate for HIFU?
Yeah, so HIFU is uniquely suited for men who have cancer that's located in just one part of the prostate. So as opposed to being diffusely throughout the entire gland, if we can identify it like we did on those films and say, well, there it is, I can put a finger exactly on what it is, then we can start to leverage focal therapies like HIFU to just treat that part of the prostate.
So you let us into your operating room.
Yes.
That was fun. You showed us how HIFU works. Let's take a look.
This part here is actually what delivers the treatment. This piece is an ultrasound probe, so it can image the prostate, but then it also generates heat. So it's the treatment part, so it allows us to both simultaneously image what we're treating and deliver the treatment. It's on a robotic arm. So what you'll see in a minute is we design a treatment plan, and then the machine itself enacts the treatment robotically, so it can control the motions at very small levels to ensure we're delivering very accurate treatment volumes. So the patient would be kind of at the head of this unit, and we would be sitting here making our treatment plans. It's all image guided, so we use MRI imaging to map out the prostate and determine where we want to treat. And then once we've identified and isolated the parts of the prostate that we want to treat, that's when the machine takes over and delivers the treatment.
So this happens inside OR. You don't describe this, of course, as a surgery. Difference between a surgery and a procedure, just so we don't scare it, because it may be a scary word, especially for Ken, who said he's never had a surgery before.
I mean, I think it depends on the person. For myself, I kind of define surgery as something where I put a knife to skin, so I make an incision somewhere. Whereas something that's non-invasive, I would probably classify it as a procedure. I think it's just semantics, right? We're just kind of splitting hairs and
procedure makes people like Ken much happier. So we're happy. We're happy. Yes. He's shaking his head. We're glad we did not have to cut in. We're glad we did not have to cut inside you, right, Ken?
Yes, very glad.
Yes. I know he might be able to live it out and not have any surgery ever. We like that. Okay, so we have some animation, and I want you to show us how HIFU works. Kind of walk us through what we're seeing.
Yeah, so this is the HIFU machine. So just like what you saw in the video from the OR, this is the ultrasound probe itself. The patient's laying on their side, and then the ultrasound probe is inserted into the rectum. This is the prostate here, and so what happens is the graphic's trying to show is we take some imaging using the image portion of the ultrasound probe to make a map, which is what's happening here. Is we're just outlining the part of the prostate that needs to be treated, and then once all that plan is in place, we turn on the machine, and the machine robotically guides the treatment. And so it delivers high intensity ultrasound, HIFU, to create heat in these cylinders of therapeutic areas. And so we guide that treatment plan, and then the machine delivers it based on the plan that we outlined. As mentioned, it's all robotically driven. So when we're talking about really, really small treatments, these are 1.7 millimeter columns. That's what you just saw, is 1.7 millimeters. As good as I might be, I can't physically control something down to that level. And so that's why we do need to leverage tools like robotic treatment arms to help ensure that those are as accurate as possible.
What happens if someone moves?
So that's a great question. The machine actually has a control for that. There's a little tag we put on their hip, on the patient's hip, and the machine tracks that tag, and if the patient moves even a millimeter, the machine will shut off. And then we can recalibrate the treatment, get them lined up again, and then keep going.
So how do side effects compare with surgery or radiation? What's the difference?
Apples and oranges.
Okay.
So the nice thing about HIFU, because we're only treating a very small part of the prostate, we don't see things like incontinence, we don't see things like erectile dysfunction, at least long term. There can be some temporary changes in urinary and sexual function just because the prostate swells. I mean, it is being traumatized for that brief period of time. But long term, we really don't see those consequences that we see from radiation and surgery.
Okay, I think you may have answered this question that came up for me was, we talk about how the prostate eventually you just don't need it. It's just kind of served its purpose. So why is it so important to be so highly focused and spare the rest of the prostate?
So unfortunately, the prostate sits anatomically at a terrible, terrible spot for quality of life. The nerves that control erections are attached to the prostate, the urinary tract runs through the middle of it, and so anytime we treat the prostate, we are going to affect those systems. And so if we can really tailor the treatment down and focus on just part of the prostate, we're going to minimize that collateral damage from treating the urinary tract or treating the nerves that control erections.
Ken, I think Dr. Parker just answered this question, but why did you decide on HIFU as the treatment, and how did you know that was right for you?
So someone had talked to me about, or Dr. Shannon talked to me about the radiation options. I didn't like any of those. I think they talked about the seeds, that kind of thing. That just didn't work for me. When he talked to me about HIFU, it seemed pretty straightforward, pretty simple, at least from my point of view. Side effects didn't seem that bad and pretty fast. So, yeah.
Ken, you told us that you felt like you were contributing to science in a way. How so?
So Dr. Proctor explained to me that this was a fairly new procedure. There wasn't, I don't think, there's a lot of data on it yet. I just kind of wanted to be a part of that, add my story, good or bad, to the data, to the numbers.
So what was your experience like on the day of the procedure?
So I had to get there really early, got there like about 6:45. They prepped me. You're kind of in that cold room with the blankets on. But everybody was nice. I think I got into surgery about 8:15, something like that, put the IV in. I remember they told me they put the mask on and they said, take 5 deep breaths. And I took those 5 deep breaths and I still didn't feel anything. And I started to take the 6, and the next thing I know, I was waking up. It was over. But other than that, it was really good. It was just fast. I think we were headed home like 10:30, something like that.
Nice. That's how it's done. I like that. All right, be sure to ask your questions. Use the chat on YouTube or Facebook. You can email the Medical News Network. Information is right there on your screen. Ken, how about recovery at home from HIFU? Any pain, soreness, any major issues?
From the surgery or from the procedure itself, really none. Very little. I mean, just a little soreness maybe. The biggest issue I had was the catheter. Those things are incredibly uncomfortable. You're supposed to have it in for a week. I had it in for, my surgery's on Friday. By accident, it came out on Saturday. It's not my fault. It was just one of those things that happened. But it did come out, and so I called the on-call doctor, told them what happened. I was prepared to come back in if necessary to have it reinserted. But he asked me, I remember this, excuse my language, please. He said, "Can you pee?" I said, "Yeah." "How about BMs?" I said, "They're fine." He said, then don't worry about it. You're good. And man, that just made the rest of my day. So, yeah.
I don't know if Dr. Parker is buying that it just accidentally fell out. I think you were ready to get that thing out of there, right?
That's right. I heard the catheter was terrible and it accidentally fell out.
Yes. And he was ready to come back in for another one. All right, Ken, good. We're glad that got out. Okay, also good is that you like pickleball. When were you able to get out and play again?
So I felt ready to play on that Monday, but they told me to take 10 days. I waited those 10 days, and I was back on the court, playing after 10 days.
Well, effectiveness matters. How did your PSA respond, and what is it now?
So immediately a month after the surgery or the procedure, it was 0.095. And Dr. Parker was very pleased. I was so glad he was pleased. Back in June, we tested again. It was 0.17. My latest reading, I think, was 0.3. But Dr. Parker's not concerned, so I'm not concerned.
That's a good number?
That's a great number.
That's what you like to
you
like to see that. What does the data show in terms of HIFU's effectiveness?
Yeah, so right now we have about 5-year data on HIFU. We view it as a control procedure, so it's not, I hope that we have cured kind of his disease. But when we think about it, because we're not treating the whole prostate and the rest of the prostate remains at risk, we have to be diligent and stay on top of monitoring and surveillance in case something pops up in another untreated part of the prostate. But when we talk about the area that we treated, the 5-year success rate is about 80 to 85%. So 80 to 85% of men are free of any recurrence in the treatment zone within 5 years.
Does HIFU preclude a patient from any future treatments?
No, that's one of the really nice things about HIFU. So we still have all the standard treatments under, as an option. So we could go back and take out his prostate. He could do the brachytherapy if he needed to in the future. We could also do HIFU again. So retreatment is a possibility. Now we generally reserve it for new cancers. So I'd want to see a cancer in a different part of the prostate to retreat. I wouldn't want to treat the same spot again. Just from a kind of logical perspective, I would view it as if it already failed once in that area, why would it be likely to succeed a second time? And so I'd want to, leverage a more traditional treatment if it were to recur in the exact same location.
Hey, Ken, I have to ask you, have you talked with other men about prostate cancer, prostate health?
Yeah, when you get older, you just have conversations with guys. Those are some things that come up as you get older. Yeah, we do. I do some. I share my experiences. They share theirs. I do have a son, an adult son. I try to get him to go in and get his PSAs checked regularly. He's a busy guy. He's got a wife and 2 kids, and so it's all about work. His personal health kind of goes to the back seat, so to speak. But yeah, I do. In fact, there's a person at my church who's relatively young, in his early 40s, who has kind of a high PSA number. So I've told him, man, you got to get that checked out. Yeah.
Good. And your son, yeah, you have a wife and 2 kids. That's why you get it checked. Dr. Parker?
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm on him. I'll stay on him. I will.
Good. Get on him. You've been doing this with us for an entire month. Mm-hmm. This is your passion. You've said this. What made you get into this specialty? Did something inspire you?
Yeah, I mean, what landed me with prostate cancer was the decision-making process. So I think you and I have been talking this entire month, if folks have been watching the show, I think one thing that really kind of comes through is there's a lot of complexity in the decision-making about what to do. Prostate cancer is one of the few diseases where when you're faced with a particular point in time, right, this is my disease, there are generally 2, 3, 4 options that you could choose from, and they're very dissimilar options. So it's not like saying, okay, well, I'm going to choose between this chemotherapy regimen and this regimen, where you're both talking about chemotherapy. We're talking about surgery, radiation, active surveillance. I mean, it's like a vegetable, a fruit, a piece of meat, right? Mm-hmm. It's not even apples and oranges. It's a completely different decision-making process. And I really enjoy the complexity of that. There's something, unique about getting to know somebody well enough to really be able to guide them through that decision.
Yeah, I mean, bring them in. You guys have this, they get to be in control of what's next.
Correct.
That's got to make them feel really good. I want to get to some questions from our viewers this morning. And Jeremy says, is HIFU a sequence of treatments, or is it typically dealt with after just one time?
Right, so it's generally just one treatment. So under anesthesia, typically takes about an hour, hour and a half to do. Now, as you saw in the video, it's a set of treatment areas that we do, but it's under one setting that we're treating.
All right, Yan Liang wants to know whether the energy from HIFU when treating the prostate can penetrate through to the bladder or even damage other internal organs.
That's a really good question. Thankfully, no, given how we do it today. Now, if you look at older generations of HIFU machines, there was some collateral damage that would occur because the heat wasn't really well controlled, and that's ultimately what we're doing. The HIFU energy is heat. But as you saw in that graphic, it is very tightly controlled, and using image guidance, we're not getting a lot of heat scatter into other areas.
Stu says, we hear about immunotherapy and cellular therapies revolutionizing cancer treatments. Are they game changers for prostate cancer too?
I think so. Now, it depends on the space. So immunotherapy, unfortunately, doesn't have a huge role in prostate cancer. Part of it has to do with the fact that prostate cancer is what's considered an immune cold disease. So the immune system doesn't really see prostate cancer cells. So your immune system has a hard time actually regulating prostate cancer. But targeted therapies, cellular therapies, I know, Pluvicto, we've talked about lutetium-177, PSMA, which is based on the imaging that we showed earlier, but actually doing a treatment based on that imaging. I think those are real game changers in this disease.
Jean wants to know, how long has HIFU been available here at the health system?
So we acquired HIFU, I think about a year ago now at this point.
Amy says, if hormone therapy can slow down prostate cancer, why don't all patients get it?
Hormone therapy is not a pleasant experience. So if you talk to guys who've been on it, the side effects are things like hot flashes, fatigue, you lose your sex drive, you gain about 10 to 15 pounds of weight. 20% of men develop osteoporosis within a year of starting hormone therapy. And so while it is a good treatment when needed, we only want to use it when needed.
That's not a go-to.
Correct.
Ken, I want to just thank you for being with us today and sharing your story. What do you want people to take away from it?
I guess a couple things. One, I feel like prostate cancer is just very manageable, treatable, maybe even curable if caught in time. But catching it in time means you gotta have periodic checks, take periodically to make sure that you stay on top of it. And then the other thing is, I guess I came on at a good time because there were options available to me, and those options were presented to me. That was the best thing.
Ken, thank you so much, and be well.
Thank you so much.
Well, before we hear thoughts from you, I'm going to do a little run through of some of the things that some of the big messages that we've heard, if I've been paying attention. Some of the big takeaways first, end the stigma. These can be sensitive and embarrassing conversations for some people to have, but speaking up, we know, can save a life, as we've heard from these patients. Know your PSA level and catch cancer early. Most men should get tested around age 50 or sooner if they're at high risk. Learn your family history. If it includes prostate cancer, breast cancer, ovarian, you are at a higher risk. And finally, there are options like we've talked about today. Don't hesitate to ask for a second opinion to explore what is available. So how'd I do? That was pretty good.
I think you did great.
I did good. I've been paying attention. What can you add to that as we wrap up this, Prostate Cancer Month here in September? Although you'll be back next month with another story. But what do you really want us to make sure that we gathered from this whole month?
I think the most important thing is advocating for your health. I think that's come through a couple of times, but ultimately, not everybody is going to be offered PSA screening, and understanding that you should be asking for it when you're, if you're average risk, 45 and above, if you're a high risk, 40 and above, high risk being family history, black men, men who have known genetic mutations. So I think, again, being an advocate for your health and taking charge of your own healthcare is very, very important.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been fun.
Thank you.
Enlightening. I've learned a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, every